COP30 a disappointment, but hopes for COP31. Green Edge by Charlotte Sterrett. Menzies for Climate.
The Peak Civil Society Climate Organisation for the Pacific Islands, PCAN, has condemned the outcome of COP30, held in Belém last month, as a failure of courage and responsibility due to the lack of agreement on phasing out fossil fuels. While the conference did have some positive outcomes, we might well agree with that assessment, especially given Australia's own vulnerability to the impacts of climate change and our responsibility as a major emitter to address climate pollution.
What is a COP?
A COP is an international climate meeting held each year by the United Nations. COP is short for Conference of the Parties, meaning those countries that have joined are, in legal terms, party to the international treaty called the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Parties to the treaty have committed to take action to prevent dangerous climate change. Countries take turns hosting an annual meeting at which parties, governments, advance the key Paris aim of limiting global warming to as close as possible to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. The first COP took place in Berlin in 1995. It established the framework for future climate change negotiations to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Since then, 29 COPs have taken place around the world, although none have taken place in Australia or the Pacific. It might seem like a global COP has nothing to do with our daily lives in Warrandyte, but it does. Decisions made at COPs affect us all.
What happened at COP30 last month?
The final agreement reached on November 22 did have a number of positive outcomes. Countries agreed to mobilise $1.3 trillion annually by 2035 for climate action. Finance to help countries adapt to climate change is to double by 2025 and triple by 2035, reflecting a stronger focus on resilience. A formal mechanism was adopted to ensure labour rights, human rights, and inclusion of marginalised groups in the climate transition. While the formal text avoided binding fossil fuel phase-out language, Brazil pledged to create voluntary roadmaps for transitioning away from fossil fuels in a just and equitable manner, and halting and reversing deforestation. However, there were major negative outcomes. On the key issue of phasing out fossil fuels, no binding agreement was reached despite strong support from over 75 nations. No formal roadmap was agreed upon to end deforestation, despite this COP being in Brazil's Amazon region, which is being devastated by the destruction of its forests. These failures occurred in the context of weakened global leadership due to the lack of US participation and the presence at the conference of a record number of fossil fuel lobbyists, some 1,600 or more. The way is still open for countries to make voluntary commitments to phase out fossil fuels and reverse deforestation, but those would fall outside the formal binding UN process.
What does this mean for COP31?
With 1.5 degrees at extreme risk, there is still much work to be done. Australia and the Pacific were hoping to host COP31, but Turkey will host it. While this is a massive disappointment for the region, Australia will take on the presidency of COP negotiations, and a dedicated leaders pre-COP meeting will be held in the Pacific region, even though the COP itself will be held in Turkey. Being the COP31 president of negotiations means that Australia will play a key role in the negotiations. It also gives us a real opportunity to put Pacific and First Nations leadership at the heart of global climate action. The Pacific pre-COP meeting is a landmark opportunity for First Nations leaders and Pacific communities to actively shape the COP31 agenda and decision-making. This meeting will be a chance for the world to learn from Pacific leaders and ensure decisions are rooted in justice for communities on the front lines of climate change. This would see a COP that replaces fossil fuels with abundant, affordable, renewable energy, centres First Nations and Pacific leadership in decision-making, embeds nature at the heart of climate action, and ensures inclusivity and grassroots participation are at the core of the summit. While 1.5 degrees hangs by a thread, there is still much to fight for. After all, we only have one Earth, our only home. There is no planet B.
This article was written by Charlotte Sterrett, former Yarra riverkeeper, current WWF Australia staffer and member of Menzies for Climate, and advocates for a swimmable Birrarung. This article was read by Rebecca Rose,
Sandy Miller.